This is probably the highest upside guy and the player that would cost the most. But he'd be a hell of a fit in Seattle. That's Jordan Westberg. I don't know how many times we're going to beat into the ground the fact that the Mariners and Orioles are perfect trade partners. Orioles need pitching. Mariners need offense. We've talked about it time and time again. Everybody has. This feels like the guy that makes the most sense. Jordan Westberg has 5 years of club control. What did he do in his first year with his service clock ticking? Made the All-Star game. 125 WRC plus. Really good bat. Nearly a 3-win player in 107 games. He missed all of August and almost all of September because he had a fractured hand. Had he not done that, he's probably closer to 3.5 or 4 in terms of his WAR. Really good player. Really controllable. Plays third base. Would be here a long time. But it's all about if the Mariners are okay giving up a starter to go get him. Because that's probably what it would cost.
Which starter?
You know, from a human side, you know what would suck? If Bryce Miller was traded for him. Because those two are such close friends and grew up friends. If they were in a trade together and never actually got to play together, that would be too bad.
It's a similar idea, though, because those two have the same amount of control.
It is. I was going to ask if...
I mean, one was an all-star and the other had an all-star caliber season.
Right.
Right?
If you traded Logan Gilbert for Jordan Westberg, could you get more? Because Gilbert is a better arm at this point. Could you get Westberg and probably not somebody else off their big league roster, but one of their solid prospects, too?
You get a solid prospect. I don't think one of their top prospects. Because Westberg himself, with the 5 years of control, carries immense value.
Mm-hmm.
And Logan, even if you value him higher because starting pitching is valued higher than an infielder, only has 3 years of control left.
Right. So it's interesting. You can make a case for a bunch of different guys to trade for Westberg. Could you trade Castillo for Westberg? Look, I think people, you included, are down on what you think the value of Luis Castillo is. Now, am I saying he's going to get you back Jordan Westberg? I don't know. The Orioles might say the age and the money isn't going to warrant you this. It's all about who is willing to trade what. But the Orioles, man, those guys need pitching. I don't think Corbin Burns is going back to Baltimore. If he doesn't, the Orioles rotation for next year is what? You're talking about Grayson Rodriguez, who showed flashes of being really good, but also got injured and had his ups and downs. You're talking about Kyle Bradish, who has been very good, also is coming off an injury from last year, a decently serious one. And after that, there's just not a lot. And the Orioles don't have a ton of pitching prospects either. So they're either going to have to sign middling starters in free agency, pay a decent amount of money for them, and hope they pan out the way that guys like Luis Severino and Sean Manaea did for the Mets this year, or they have to go find real starting pitching. Luis Castillo is still real starting pitching. If the Mariners, again, took some of that money, doesn't have to be all of it, I think there's a world you could get back Jordan Westberg. And that would be worth it for the Mariners because he hasn't hit arbitration for another couple years. So it's not that expensive on their books.
Then that leaves us to the question of would Luis Castillo approve a trade there? Because
Right.
if not, you would need to wait another entire year to which you could trade Luis Castillo without him needing to approve it.
Right.
In which case, that improves your standing, actually. The best case scenario of trading Luis Castillo is he goes out this year in the Mariners rotation, has an awesome season, and then his no-trade clause goes up in thin air, on January 1st, 2026.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. And then maybe an Orioles-Mariners trade does happen then, if one doesn't happen before then.
Then I legitimately think you could get Jordan Westberg for Luis Castillo because you could then leverage Castillo to other teams. Yep. I've explained it before, but the no-trade clause really pins you in, where if a player says he's only willing to go to one team, then you have the other team knows you have no leverage if you actually want to trade this player.
Right.
There's no other option to go to.
Right.
But if you wait until next year, that won't be the case for Luis Castillo. Right now, honestly, I don't think you could get Jordan Westberg for Luis Castillo. You would need to send more things over on your sense.
Right.
But doesn't mean it doesn't make sense for the Mariners to try that if Jordan Westberg is somehow on the block. Have we actually heard if he's on the block?
No, the Orioles aren't going to openly shop him around. Why would they? But Passon's talked about it. He thought that's a guy that makes a lot of sense for the Mariners. He has openly put that out there. I've heard other people talk about it. It just feels like a guy that makes sense. Look, the Orioles have 2 third basemen. This is why this is getting talked about. And I'm sure if it was up to the Orioles, they'd probably rather trade Kobe Mayo because the guy's less proven. And I will say, Kobe Mayo was unreal in the minor leagues. The guy's gotten comps to Austin Riley. He has. He has that type of power in his game. He's like that type of player, can play first and third. Riley doesn't really play first, but still, that type of player. And he's intriguing. However, I don't think the Mariners are in a position where they can afford to be trading significant assets to get back somebody who's unproven. The only guy I'd sign off on that for is if you were going to trade for Jackson Holliday, because you know that guy's ceiling might be he could win an MVP and a batting title. But for Mayo, no, I think you have to take the proven guy that's been an all-star in Westburg, and oh, by the way, has 5 years of club control compared to Mayo, who would have 6.
So last thing on Jordan Westberg, build me a trade package for him.
Let's say, okay, I'll do this one first, and then I'll try a different one afterwards. Say Castillo approved a trade to Baltimore. Says, look, that's a team that's competitive. They're winning. Park's friendly enough for pitchers now. What if it was Castillo, and then you throw in a couple prospects? Say it's Castillo and somebody, in that 6 to 10 range. What if it's Michael Arroyo?
Okay.
For Westburg.
Just
now
those two?
Sure, let's say you get an infielder back and a guy that is, I don't know if you call him a top-end starting pitcher at this point. He can be that, but a very good big league starter. And let's say the Mariners eat half his contract. Because, again, what does that do? What does that do to them for Westburg? Because the guy's going to be totally inexpensive for 2 years.
Right. Mariners save money anyway.
Yeah. Right.
So, yes. Okay. I think the Orioles would do that. If there are somehow Orioles fans listening to this, please tell us if you would or not. So Castillo and Michael Arroyo for Jordan Westberg.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And yet another one.
If they'd say no to that, then yes, you're probably going to have to trade one of the 4 starters you would get uncomfortable with trading. If I'm the Mariners, I don't know if they'd be that uncomfortable trading Luis Castillo. I'm not saying they want to do it. But I think they'd have a lot more nightmares about trading one of the other 4 than they would about Luis.
Even if you trade one of those 4 and it's Westberg and Kjerstad?
Okay, if you were going to trade Logan Gilbert and you were going to get Jordan Westberg and Heston Kjerstad back, I could buy into that. I mean, I'll tell you what. I don't know if the Orioles would do this because then they have no third baseman. But if you were going to trade Logan Gilbert for Jordan Westberg and Kobe Mayo, yeah, I'd do that because then you might have your corner infield of the future.
Yep.
But the Orioles might not want to trade 2 third basemen. So, yeah, if it was going to be Westberg and it can't be Westberg and Kowser. That'd be too much. The Orioles wouldn't do that. So, Westberg and Kjerstad, yeah. For Logan Gilbert, that's a pretty good package.
It's in the ballpark. I don't know if Logan Gilbert would stay with the Orioles, given that they couldn't work anything out with Corbin Burns, but time would tell in that case. And Logan doesn't have the luxury of having a no trade clause, so we'll see. Mm-hmm. But that's an option for the Mariners if Westberg is privately available and they could shop around this offseason. And even though they say Plan Z, if there's no other way to upgrade their offense, that's something they're going to have to do.
Again,
let's get to my.
Last quick thing before you get into your A-level guy. Of course, the Mariners say that. That has been their message in public forever now. Why on earth would you go out and talk about, yes, we'll look at all options, we'll think about trading a pitcher? That tanks the value. The Mariners don't want to be shopping pitchers around. They know if they don't do that, they can jack up the value. I don't totally believe that they're totally against the idea of trading an arm. I think they're just against talking about it publicly to the media.